Welcome to Lift Talk, where we talk about lifting. This is episode 3, and I was joined by Luke Tulloch, who was here from Sweden. So I got him into the studio for a quick episode, and we just got to know Luke a lot better. And at the end of the podcast, we talked about some ideas around mental fatigue in training and also some different ways to look at autoregulation. Enjoy the episode. Luke, thanks for joining me, man. I've realized that every podcast that you've been on, you kind of just get asked all this scientific information.
Yep.
No one wants to actually find out about Luke Tulloch himself. So I figure we could go down that road for a little bit and then come back with some slightly interesting fitness information at the end.
Sounds good, man.
So I want to know your sort of first interaction with physical culture. What kind of roped you into the whole strength physique world?
Yeah, well, it was training for footy, I guess, and going to the gym at school was the first sort of interaction I had with lifting.
Is that rugby union?
Yeah, rugby union. Private school boy, so I played rugby union. And
Me too.
Yeah. And we had a dude there, I think he was a history teacher, who had trained like some sprinters or something at a high level. And so he just taught random kids who were interested how to like power snatch and like clean and jerk and stuff. So he was very excited when a few of us were pretty keen. And so he would teach us that stuff, which was really fun. And so I got into it that way. And then I guess I just sort of liked it and started reading more about it. And then it was full ball like T-Nation, man. Yeah. So that was like my interaction with physical culture, I guess, and all the stuff that those guys used to write about on T-Nation way back.
At what age were you at this point when you were learning the power snatches and stuff?
Maybe 15,
Okay.
I'd say. I was a bit of a chubby kid, and so I got really self-conscious about my body image. And
At that same age?
Yeah, maybe just before that. Maybe when I was like 14 and started like running and just doing like push-ups in my bedroom and stuff. And then, played rugby and got into lifting weights and stuff, and then saw my body actually like change a lot more. And so I guess it just kind of made me go, oh, this really works. And then I went all in on it. So
did you ever notice like the physiques of other athletes that kind of roped you in as well? Like, was that something that you ever noticed?
Yeah, well, look, I got to like, especially through the T-Nation, I got really obsessed with like bodybuilding. I thought it was so cool. So I would definitely like be quite physique focused when I looked at stuff, but I thought training purely for physique was like stupid. So basically the programs I followed were like essentially powerlifting programs. Yeah. Like I got into starting strength and 531 and like modified West Side templates, even though I was like 18 years old and not lifting with powerlifting gear. And I kind of thought that sort of, doing your fives was the way to like get big and strong, which it is. But at the time I was kind of like not training for bodybuilding, so to speak, but I still kind of admired the physiques and thought they looked great. So, yeah, it was kind of weird. I don't know how it worked in my head.
I remember my first interaction with sort of physical culture. I don't know if you remember the basketball magazines called Slam Magazine. Do you remember those?
No.
So like I was obviously huge into basketball growing up. I think I was like about 12. Mm-hmm. And they used to have these like big cutouts of like dudes dunking and stuff. And there was this one guy called Corey Maggette, who when I actually wrote my first ever program, I called it Project Corey Maggette because I wanted to have this guy's arms because he was so fucking jacked. And I remember like saying to my friend who was also into it at the time, I remember saying it to him like, man, some of these guys are like so muscular, they look so good. And one of my friend's mums was like, oh, all you need to do to get like arms and shoulders like that is put 2 Coke cans in either hand and go for a run. And the extra reps from the jogging will get you like really toned. She actually used the word toned. And I remember at the time thinking like that is just bullshit. There's just no way. I'm like 12 years old already calling out shit fitness information. I remember that being the first one.
That's so good.
When you like sort of went down the powerlifting route following starting strength 531, all that kind of stuff, how strong did you get? Like, give us some podcast clout.
Oh, mate, reasonably strong. I think I squatted 240 at one point, and when I was like 19 or something. Oh, wow. And deadlifted something similar. And then my bench press wasn't very good. It was like maybe 120, I think, was my best lift at the time. So yeah, I got pretty strong. I was really good at squatting, so I just used to squat all the time. But because I got kind of into the West Side style for whatever reason, I was just like maxing out so much, like so much. So I would have gotten way stronger if I'd actually trained properly.
Yeah.
But I guess you get a lot of practice at lifting heavy that way. So you know you end up feeling comfortable with a very heavy weight on your back. And I remember also being able to front squat some ridiculous number, like I could front squat like 180 or something at 19 or whatever, which was pretty good. And then I power cleaned 140, you know, so I was pretty strong, not freak level. Like there's obviously lots of, you know, high schoolers in Texas now that would just like wipe the floor with you like that. But it was pretty strong for that time, I suppose.
Did you ever consider competing in powerlifting or bodybuilding?
I don't know, not really. For some reason, I just kind of didn't care. I didn't really care about competing. I cared about getting stronger. I cared about getting bigger, but I didn't really want to compete. I don't know why that was.
Was it like the access to information about comps and stuff? Like, because obviously no social media at that point.
Yeah,
You
maybe.
weren't aware of it?
Yeah, probably. I think that's probably a thing. But I remember all throughout like I'm much smaller than I used to be now. But you know, when I was like bodybuilding and stuff, I always remember like any bodybuilding coach I knew, like Rawdon, for example, they're always like, man, you got to compete. Like, when are you going to compete? Like, let me prep you and stuff. And I was like, I just have no interest in that. I watch bodybuilding competitions and stuff, and I knew all the top bodybuilders, but I just didn't have any interest in competing.
Was it just because of the actual effort that it took to get on stage, like the amount that it takes out of you?
Maybe. I don't know. I felt like I didn't really care what a judge thought of my physique.
Thought,
You know what I mean? I just kind of like wanted to look mad by my own standard or something, I guess. I don't
did you
really
achieve
know.
that in the end?
Oh, mate, it was really weird because if I look back at photos of myself now, I feel like, Jesus. I mean, I was 8 or 9 kilos heavier and leaner than I am now. And like pretty fucking jacked. Like I think the average person on the street probably would have been like, oh, this guy's a bit freaky. But it's weird because I think when you progress to a certain level, you're now on the bottom rung of the next stratosphere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So you go from being like, oh, you know, I'm pretty big, and then you're sort of competing maybe against the other people in the gym, and then okay, now I'm like the biggest guy in the gym or one of, and then you're sort of now comparing your physique against like competitive bodybuilders. And then you're comparing yourself against maybe professional competitive bodybuilders, and you just feel like a complete tiny weakling again. So it was a weird thing that like almost the more advanced you get, it's like the less you appreciate your physique in a lot of ways. It was a really strange thing.
Yeah, that does make sense. And also the amount of effort per unit that you have to give to get to the next level. It can be not worth it for a lot of people, like from a lifestyle perspective.
Well, that's what happened to me. Is I just went like, what is the point of this? I just can't push anymore. I don't want to. And what happens then? You know. Yeah. So.
And that would have, you kind of would have gone through that thinking period when I started at Lift in around 2016 or so. Yeah. And then you went into gymnastics and stuff.
Yeah. So I tried gymnastics for a bit. I quit bodybuilding for a while and did gymnastics for like 6 or 8 months or something, and lost a lot of size. And then I started training bodybuilding again because I kind of got sick of the gymnastics, and I just blew up, and everyone was like, bro, you want gear? And I was like, no, I used to be this size. Before you came, I used to be this size. Yeah. It was fun doing something different, but like, I don't know, it didn't really scratch the itch for me.
So you mentioned, starting strength 531 being like early influences. And then you kind of went into the fitness first world.
Yep.
And I was at another fitness first on the other side of the city.
Yeah.
And you were kind of influenced by Poliquin at that point.
Yeah, heavily.
So how do you kind of reflect on those times, and do you regret going that hard down that route, or?
I think I became pretty closed-minded, as a lot of Poliquin disciples did at the time. I think it was kind of nice because we had this like little community that thought they knew better than everybody else, you know? So that was kind of fun. And so I do regret going that hard down there and not being as open, I suppose. But I think it also, like a lot of what Poliquin taught, maybe not on the nutrition front, but on the training front, is it's kind of got a strong thread of truth, and maybe the explanation was just wrong. And certainly there was a big element of work ethic in his teachings as well, which I think served me well. So I think I went too hard down that route for sure, but at least I was, reflective enough to kind of go, well, some of this stuff kind of doesn't make sense, and then challenge that a bit. Like, how come bodybuilders eat lots of carbs and they get really shredded if carbs make you fat? Like, that doesn't make sense. Things like that.
Yeah. I remember we had one, as you call him, Poliquin disciple. We had one at our gym, and he would come in with his meat and nut breakfast.
Yeah.
And he was telling certain trainers that they had too much body fat to eat carbs and all this stuff. And he was kind of a bit of an outcast, but it was the opposite at your gym. Like, you had a bit of a crew.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's super cringy. But the reason why I kind of went... So I started at George Street Fitness first, right? In 2008. And a lot of really good trainers there. And this, I would sort of train there for a couple of years, and then I decided I want to go back to uni and I wanted to do something fitness related, because I started in like a business degree and didn't really like it, fell into personal training in the meantime. And so I went back to uni and then went on exchange to the US. And when I came back from the US, I was like, cool, I want to go back to George Street Fitness first. And at this time, there were now like a bunch of different Poliquin trainers there. So I just we kind of clicked, and Cato was one of them.
Were you already into Poliquin like when you went over to the US, or was that just when you got back?
I was.
Yeah, you were?
I think I'd started getting heavily into it just before. So when I was in the US, I actually took a Poliquin course there, a biosignature course.
Was there a particular like piece of information that you heard that made you like kind of doubt the whole system?
Well, I think some of the nutrition stuff just kind of didn't make sense when you really thought about it. It's like, but people do other stuff and they still seem to get results, So I don't know, you get so focused on like what's correct, and you kind of go, oh yeah, but they would get better results if they did this, or whatever it is. But I think it was just like, if you actually thought about things logically and critically, you kind of saw that the sort of extremism of the views was too extreme. So slowly it started to unravel a little bit. But, when you're in it, it's like the bee's knees and this is how you do things.
Yeah.
So,
appeal to authority type of stuff.
Oh, massively. Yeah. How many Olympians have you trained, bro?
Yeah.
It's like, come on.
I was actually prepping one of my first ever clients for a bodybuilding show, and he was also a trainer at the same fitness first I worked at. And this Poliquin disciple guy came to me, and he thought he was like telling on the other guy because he was eating cereal in the morning. And I think it was maybe like 5 or 6 weeks out. He's like, Alex, do you know that Rob's eating like Nutri-Grain?
Oh, dude.
And I was like, what's wrong with that?
It's not meat or nuts,
and
mate.
then he's like, oh, like, why is he eating carbs? He's so close to comp. Like, he's still got body fat to lose. I'm like, he's doing fine. He's doing
sweet.
Completely fine.
Yeah. Far out, man. Yeah, those days were wild. Absolutely wild.
Do you have any funny stories from the Fitness First gym floor?
Oh, dude. Yeah. So I don't know if you ever saw this guy, but he used to go around all of the Fitness Firsts in the city, and like he'd also go like King's Cross and stuff. But there was a dude who used to like dance in the gym, and that was kind of his training, was like a mixture of posing and dancing.
He used to dance.
Yeah. So he had these specific dances he does, and I think there might even still be footage on YouTube of this guy. But he was like, he looked sort of Mediterranean, and he was maybe, I don't know, like 45 or something, and like an okay rig, but he would go in like real early in the gym, and he would kind of bop and dance along to whatever song was there, and then he would like strike a pose. So he'd be like, and do all these like weird flexes and stuff, and he'd basically be flexing, but he'd be doing it for hours, man. Like, I'm dead set hours. And in between all of this, he'd refuel with oranges or Mandy's. So he'd bring all this like fucking citrus in with him, and then he'd like stand and flex and dance, and everyone's like, there's a big circle around him. Like fucking, it's lunchtime in the city. It is crowded, but there's like this circle around the dude because no one wants to go near him because he's just like obviously really weird. And then he'd stop and he'd like furiously peel this orange and like chomp it down as fast as he could, and then he'd get back to like flexing. And yeah, just nuts. And so then he'd get kicked out eventually because they're like, mate, you're getting in the way of everybody. So he'd go to the next Fitness First down the road and he'd do the same thing for like 2 hours and then go to King's Cross. And he'd tell us occasionally if we caught his eye, he'd start trying to talk to us. So as the trainers, and we'd just be like, mate, what are you doing, sort of thing. And he's like, oh, all these weights you lift, it's not real muscles. What I do, that makes real muscles. And we're like, mate, you look like shit and you're fucking weird.
Did he ever lift? Like, was he ever actually training?
Or no, he would sometimes do like heaps of chin-ups. So he'd like jump on the assisted chin-up machine or something and he'd do like
50.
Yeah, well, he'd do like 3 half reps, but then he'd jump off and rest like 20 seconds and do like 3 half reps again. And it was like too light to really do anything. So he's done, 500 half rep chin-ups.
And 1 million dance moves.
Yeah, and 1 million dance moves and eaten like 10 oranges.
That is so strange.
So you get folk like that. It's just, I mean, he was the weirdest one, but there are a few weirdos like that around, man.
I remember there was this old member who came up to me one time when I was squatting and was telling me that my knees were caving in.
No.
And this guy would have been probably 75 and
the worst.
frail.
Yeah.
And I'm at this point just getting into powerlifting. Like, I think I'd probably done one comp at that point. I'm thinking like, who the fuck is this guy trying to tell me? Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
I remember just some seriously weird people at Fitness First.
But there are a few that you always get. I remember, I think I trained at like Hornsby Fitness First sometimes because I lived around there and then I would work in the city. And then at Hornsby Fitness First, there was some old bloke who like used to powerlift back in the day. And yeah, he was like also mid-70s. And he'd basically just come in and just sit there until someone went into the squat rack. And then he'd just start basically trying to train them, just like critique their technique and stuff. And it's like, mate, who are you?
I would have been far more receptive if this guy was an ex-powerlifter or something.
Yeah.
This guy was like
just some random
old guy who would like do aerobics classes and stuff. Like, it was the most embarrassing thing for me to have an old guy trying to tell me how to lift.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I'm a trainer here. I'm supposed to be telling people how to lift. Oh, dear. So I guess you mentioned like in transitioning away from bodybuilding in that it didn't meet your life circumstances. And like now you've gone through the biggest life shift that, we could probably ever have, which is being a dad. So how have you found the whole experience and, what's been some memorable stuff so far of fatherhood?
Yeah, I was telling you before we started recording, it was the initial period was super hard, man. Like really hard. You get a really big identity shift. So anyone who's gone through, I mean, it's obvious, but all the things that you kind of take as part of your identity, your job, your hobbies, your relationships with people, all of that obviously takes a back seat when you get a kid, and now you've got to take care of them. And at the same time, we were live in Sweden now, and we were still fairly new in the city in Gothenburg where we were. And so I found it really, really difficult. So it was a big shift, man. And then our daughter was not very good at sleeping and this kind of stuff. So yeah, training time goes way down, all this kind of thing. And it's incredible. Like the highs are higher than anything else, but I think the lows were also really, really low. So yeah, it was difficult to get a handle on, but yeah, I mean, she's 1.5 years old now and just so much fun. So it's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you realize when you become a parent how much free time you used to have.
Oh, for sure.
Like now I think like there's so many things I used to do where I would just waste so much time doing absolutely nothing. And now I don't have the luxury to do that.
Yep.
But I also think those first few months, like you said, it's hard for dad because we don't get a lot back.
Yeah.
Because it's like they can kind of they don't really need anything from you other than like affection.
Yep.
Which they could get from mum.
Yep.
But they need mum for warmth and milk and all those kinds of things. So I really struggled with that period as well. And I really started to enjoy being a dad like 10 times more once you started to get a little bit back, like get a laugh, get a smile, like those kind of things.
I mean, reflects my experience for sure. I actually think the first period is like you obviously love them, but the overwhelming feeling for me was one of responsibility. Like, and then as her personality emerged more and as we interacted more, I actually started to like her as a person.
Yeah.
And started to love her more and more. Whereas in the first maybe 3 to 6 months, it was just like, I am responsible for keeping this poor thing alive that can't do anything for itself, But now it's a genuine, like, I actually love her. I love being around her, and I love her personality.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I was terrified at first. Like, they don't give you a parenting manual.
yeah,
You have to figure this shit out.
yeah,
And there's like you said, this responsibility to keep them alive, and you don't really know how to do that.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I really struggle with that. What would you say your favorite part of being a dad is now?
Well, I think it's taught me a few things, and there's maybe like three things I can think of, and the first is this sort of idea of acceptance, I suppose. Like for me, I've always been a bit of a researcher, you know, like I like to figure things out and understand how they work and do them better. And when you have a child and she's not sleeping or she's not latching properly or whatever, I kind of wanted to get in and fix it somehow. And so I'd be Googling and searching and what can we do differently? And I kind of realized that at some point, it's actually so much easier to just accept that the situation is shit and it's hard and just get on with it.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think teaching that sort of acceptance actually allowed me to shed this massive sort of weight off my back and just be like, yeah, it sucks, but like, I'm just going to deal with it. So it really taught me that, which I think has been really helpful. And, you know, I suppose the other stuff is just sort of seeing, I guess it's a bit of a cliche, but seeing the world through their eyes, I think is so special as well. The first time they do something or interact with something or learn a word or whatever, it's so exciting.
Yeah,
it's just incredible.
Yeah.
So that's been really fun, and it gives you a massive appreciation of the world, I suppose, which is really cool. So those are a couple of things that I really enjoy about it. But like I said, I enjoy seeing my little girl's like personality and preferences and stuff emerge and just develop, which is amazing.
Would you say she's more like you or more like Farney from personality?
I don't know. I think maybe a bit more like me at the moment. She's super cheeky.
Yeah.
And super curious. So maybe a bit more like me. But I think we're both very independent people. And so, you know, she's got a strong independent streak, put it that way.
That's good, yeah.
Yeah, which is cool.
Yeah, I have the same thing with Summer as well. I just love like watching them figure something out.
Yeah.
Like whether they're playing with a toy and they're trying to figure out how to like take off a Lego block and put it back on. Like watching their little brain work is so interesting.
Yeah.
Just the other day, so we do this thing where once we change Summer's nappy, we go to the end of the balcony and we get her to throw it off.
Yeah.
And then we get her to come down the stairs and find it and then put it in the bin.
Yep.
So she's like found it, just walked over to the bin. I step on the little bin pedal and she's holding it by the bag string. Because it's like dropping down a little bit low, she can't quite get it over the lip of the bin. So she put it down on the floor and then picked it up by the meat of the bag.
Yeah.
And then she was able to reach and get it in. And I was like, man, that's so cool that they can like just figure that out already.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't know about you, but sometimes you have to just like avoid jumping in and be like, hey, let's see how she problem solves this.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
It's cool.
And that's something that Chrissy and I think do quite well is like we let her have her own space to, like you said, be independent, but also just like see if she can figure it out rather than like, hey, no, here's how you do it.
Yep.
Because they don't learn.
Yeah, for sure. It's a bit counterintuitive. I think parenting has also taught me this a bit. So I'll give an example. You know, when we're at the playground, so there's like these, they call it like an öppna förskola, which is like a open daycare, I suppose. So there's like, you can pay a membership fee, which is like $50 a year, and then you get a code to like this toy shed at one of the playgrounds. And so there's all these toys in there. And so when we go to this playground, a lot of the kids will pull out their favorite one, and Freya's got like a favorite doll that she likes and stuff. And so if another kid has it, she'll go up and like look at it and like kind of want it. And I've often found that other parents are kind of like, oh, you got to share it now. Like it's her turn, give it to her. And I'm a bit like, I know your heart's in the right place. You're trying to teach them to share, but what you're teaching my daughter is that if she wants something, she gets to have it.
Yes.
And so it felt a bit counterintuitive, but when you sort of think of these situations, it's like it can get quite complex. And you're like, what do I do here? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So what do you do?
Well, like I try and tell them like, hey, I'm very hands off when the kids are interacting. I'm kind of like, just let them do whatever. And if they kind of get a bit pushy and shovey or a bit whiny or whatever. Like, I'm like, that's cool. Like, they're just learning how to interact with each other. Like, we don't need to necessarily intervene all the time.
Yeah.
You know, what's the worst that's going to happen?
As long as they're not slapping each other in the face or
Right.
pulling each other's hair or something,
100%.
which definitely happens.
Yeah. yeah. That too, for sure. But it's these situations where you learn that, okay, you have the best intentions, you're trying to do the right thing, but maybe sometimes you're actually undermining their independence or the lesson that you're trying to give them or something.
It's also a good lesson for the kid to not just give up the toy because someone else wants it.
Exactly right.
They should have the right to say, no, actually, I'm still playing with it.
I'm still playing with it, yeah. Exactly, yeah.
Cool. I think we covered the life of Luke Tulloch quite well there.
Yeah.
Let's go into some actual fitness stuff. And I asked you to bring me a couple of topics that you're interested in at the moment so we could have a little bit of a discussion. First one was on autoregulation, which, RPE is kind of taken over powerlifting as sort of the, I would say, dominant method of programming these days. But you kind of posed the idea that we could talk about some alternate uses for autoregulation. What are some of those?
So, RPE is essentially adjusting load, or it's adjusting reps or like proximity to failure, right? But I think the other variables that we program with, you can also adjust. You can adjust things like exercise order or even your training day order. You can adjust which exercises you use and things like this. And that's probably it's the area that has good research behind it now, but it's an area that I don't see a lot of coaches really using. So the simplest way to auto-regulate essentially is like daily undulating periodization, where you have some maybe harder days and some easier days, and you just basically choose which one you want to do based on your physical and mental readiness. That's massively, massively underrated in my opinion. And so for me, there's a couple of implications, because it means that you need to, or you can program days of different difficulties, but it's also like with your training split, you kind of have to think about that, because if you program somebody 5 days a week, there's less flexibility in how they can move around sessions, or if they need to skip a session for whatever reason. So you have to kind of think about your training split a little bit there as well. Maybe 4 days a week makes it a bit easier, and maybe they are longer days or something, but given that it provides a more flexible training week, it might be worth the trade-off.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the first thing that I always look at, and then tell my clients like, hey, you've got the option of, like, you're not feeling it, do the arm day or whatever, as opposed to the leg day. So that's the first thing that I think of. The next thing, which has pretty good research behind it, is having variation in exercise selection. So there was one study where they had people, this was for muscle growth. I actually think they measured strength as well. They measured bench press and squat, if I remember right. But it was a 12-week training program, and one group had a fixed training program. They had to use the same exercises each training session, and the other group had a choice of 3 different exercises for each muscle group. So if you were training chest, you would get like barbell bench press, like cable crossover, and like a dumbbell bench press or something. And every session they could just walk in and be like, sweet, well, the sets and reps and rest are all fixed, but I get to choose one of these 3 exercises, whatever I feel like on the day. And at the end of the 12 weeks, there was no difference between the 2 groups. So it's showing us that having that degree of flexibility, even though maybe we want to have very tight control of some training variables, worst case scenario, it's like no different. And best case scenario, there was actually some trends for increased muscle growth in this group. So for me, that's like, cool. Well, we have this option now as a coach to be able to put that stuff in. And I have seen some people maybe try to take this too far and just kind of be like, well, if we're auto-regulating and stuff, like, you can just do whatever you want, right? It's RPE and it's choose your exercise and it's choose your training day. Well, there's no structure in that.
Yeah, where's the actual coaching?
Yeah, where's the coaching? Where's the actual program? You can't just do whatever you want, which is true. Like, I think a training program does need to have, for this auto-regulation idea to work, you need to have some things built in and fairly structured. But I want to move away from the only thing that is auto-regulated is the RPE. There are other things that we can play with too.
Yeah.
So that's one way you can do it. And of course, then there's other iterations of that. I mean, you can think of a million different ways. You could have your primary lift and then have the accessories be rotated more regularly, or you choose from a list or something like that. And the other thing that I do sometimes to allow a lot of sort of promote a lot of autonomy for my clients is I give them a time limit, and I just say you can like basically do whatever you want on arms in this time limit. So at the end of a session, if you feel like you want to do some more training, cool. You set a timer for 10 minutes or 12 minutes. Just do whatever sets, reps, rest, whatever you like. Any arm exercises you like, just go for it. And as a coach, you still control to some extent the amount of volume they do, because there's only so much you can do in 10 minutes. But it gives them a huge level of autonomy. And it's also something where you can go like, you know what, if you're really not feeling it and you need to get out of the gym or whatever, just cut that little extra 10 minutes off at the end. You don't need to do it.
Yeah.
So you can start to get really creative with this idea of, you know, choosing different exercises or something as a form of auto-regulation.
Yeah. I think powerlifters would have a bit of a hesitation towards that because a lot of them are very rigid in the way they do things. So Chrissy, my wife, she developed this thing called a training library during her pregnancy. And excuse me, based off how she was feeling on the day, because obviously pregnancy, she's very variable in how prepared she was to train, or certain muscle groups were sore, or she was just tired. She had a little training library, which was just a list of exercises that she would get done in the week, and she would just do them as she pleased throughout the week.
Cool.
And that's like the first kind of use I've seen of that actually being really positive. So I really like that one. On the exercise selection standpoint, I think it just comes back to the idea of what you like will spark more effort.
Yep.
And more effort will spark better stimulus, essentially.
100%.
So like if you say, hey, pick a bicep exercise, do 3 sets, make them hard. Someone's going to pick their favorite bicep exercise. They're going to do 3 really hard sets. They're going to be high quality, and you can guarantee that they can tick that off and move on.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, you know, the other element of it is this might get a bit esoteric, but it doesn't just affect their progress because they're putting in more effort. But if we look at the sort of prevailing theory in psychology, academic psychology, is self-determination theory. And a key tenet of that is feeling like you have mastery over something and feeling like you have autonomy. So, I mean, you can see how being able to auto-regulate the exercise selection ticks that box for the client. And I definitely think that little, you know, the 10 minutes at the end or whatever thing that I use, I try and do that so that I can still have tons of structure in my programs, but I have this element of, hey, you're the boss here. You feel like you can manage some of the programming.
Yeah, a little carrot dangled at the end.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you see this happen in the inverse is like certain people, let's like use front squats, for example, because I hate front squats. If my coach put front squats in my program, I would be like, first of all, I don't like these. Second of all, I don't like them because I'm really bad at them.
Yeah.
And the output I'm going to get out of them is not going to be as good as if I use a safety bar squat or something like that.
Yep.
So like we can see how being fixed in that regard can actually have detriment.
Absolutely.
Front squat might be the optimal choice for that slot, but not for that person.
Definitely. Yeah, and so certainly that, like, when you get that conversation of optimal, it's like it's quite variable because it depends on the person as well, right? It's not just like the biomechanics of the exercise or the specificity or whatever it is.
Yeah, it all comes back to the psychology, really. Like that's so big and so forgotten by a lot of coaches. A lot of coaches just like, here's your program, do it, without thought into, you know, how they feel about it or how motivated they are or what their preferences are.
But I think a lot of coaches are threatened by that as well, because they kind of feel like if I'm programming something where the client gets to choose, then all of a sudden I'm not so important.
Yeah, I'm not the boss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, ultimately, the thing is though, is if the client is getting better results and enjoying themselves more, they're more likely to stick with you.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Cool. Is there anything else on autoregulation that you thought that, you know, powerlifters could potentially benefit from in their training? Any other uses?
Look, that's the main thing, I think. But I guess one of the key things to note is the research showing that yes, periodization is still generally positive especially for strength. Maybe less so for hypertrophy because it's not really directly studied so much. But autoregulation has shown that it is at least as good as traditional periodization, like fixed style periodization, and it might be better in terms of gains. So it's just something to, I think, take advantage of. And as a coach, it's your job to kind of figure out where it might be applicable for the individual that you're coaching. So
yeah, and I think it's a take home for lifters too, that you don't have to follow something that's super, super rigid.
Yeah.
you do have a lot of choice, you do have a lot of flexibility, and perhaps you could talk to your coach about that as well, about building some of that flexibility in, or taking a little bit more control over exercise selection or exercise order or all those other variables.
Yeah. Obviously, it's going to come down to, I mean, there's probably somebody listening to this going like, oh, well, I hate that. I want to know exactly what I'm doing. And that's fine too. So you don't have to have.
And that's psychology as well.
Well,
It's
exactly.
like
Exactly.
a lot of powerlifters are a bit robotic because it's a sport that you do have control over. You know, you play a game of rugby, you can't control where the ball's going to be. You can't control where the other 29 people on the field are going to be. You can't control the referee's decisions, blah, blah, blah. But powerlifting, you have the same barbell, the same weights, the same rack, the same everything. Like, you're really locked into that. And I think that's kind of a trait of a lot of powerlifters, to be in control and to like to be in control and to like to think that they're in control. And if you do think that you're in control and you think that's a benefit to you, it probably is.
Yeah. For sure.
The other topic that you brought to me was mental training fatigue.
Yep.
What kind of sparked your interest in this one?
Well, as you could probably tell, I do like looking at some psychology stuff, and there's interesting research on mental fatigue and how it affects our subsequent performance in various tasks. And so there's a little bit on this and training. So when I say mental fatigue, it's just like prolonged cognitive activity causes this mental fatigue. And there's some research where they will induce mental fatigue. So they'll give you like a task. One of them is called a Stroop task. The other one's like an N-back task. And basically what they do is like, I'll describe the Stroop task, but they'll flash up words on a screen, and the words are like colors. So it'll be like blue, yellow, red or whatever. But the actual color of the word is a different color. And so as they flash up, it'll be like the word blue, but it's colored red. And you're supposed to say the color of the word and not what the word says.
Right.
So, you know, you have to sort of stop and think for a second.
There's a drinking game with that same premise where you like hand the cards around and you go around in a circle, and it's very hard.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Bit of mental fatigue. Yeah. So, but they'll do that for like 20, 30 minutes. So it sucks. But then they'll go in and lift. And in this one study, they did squats at 70% 1RM to failure, see how many, so 3 sets of that, see how many reps they got. And the people doing the cognitive task prior to this did like 16% less squat volume. In another study, they did also significantly less squat volume. So there's some effect there on the mental side of things. That, I mean, physically, they both have the same amount of energy, so to speak. So that really sparked my interest, and that's kind of been replicated in several different things, which is super interesting.
Anecdotally, I've got 4 clients actually right now who are doing their HSC.
Yeah.
And they're all like so committed to training in their weapons. One of them had an exam like last week, 3-hour maths exam, and trained immediately afterwards. And he was like, dude, that was so tough.
Yep.
And like, that's exactly what you're saying.
It changes RPE perception as well. There's a study looking at that.
Is it like a brain fog thing?
Well, we don't really know. We don't really know for sure. But we do know that it has implications for things like that. I mean, that's a great example, but I also think going back to autoregulation, that's one way that we can mitigate some of this, because let's say you have a day at work or at school or at uni that is super intense, and you're supposed to be doing a heavy squat session or your hard leg day or whatever that afternoon. Well, shit, maybe you just want to switch that around for an easier day so that it's not impacted as much. Or maybe you want to try lifting in the morning before your day full of meetings or whatever. You know, so I think from a practical standpoint, there's stuff we can do with training to kind of take that stuff into consideration.
Is there any relationship in the inverse, in like physical activity affecting mental?
I haven't looked at that.
Okay. Because I'm now interested in that.
But that would be interesting to hear too. I'm sure it does. I don't know about you, but anecdotally, if I do a really hard leg day, I'm pretty cooked and I'm like not very productive after that. So.
I don't know. I feel like it kind of like wakes me up for the day.
Yeah.
I hate training in the morning, but if I ever have to, I feel like I have a good day because I'm like, I've got that out of the way.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What are some of the signs of mental fatigue? Like, can we actually sort of spot this before it arrives, or is it more of like a scheduling thing? and
Well,
prediction thing?
I think you should probably think about scheduling, but I think you'll probably know if you're a little bit mentally fatigued. But interestingly, there's also research on stuff like smartphone use or playing video games. In some studies, they've given people like a phone and had other people just chill and watch a documentary for 30 minutes. And the people on the phone were just using social media. And then they went in to perform their exercise and again got less training volume, like similar effects to the mental fatigue stuff.
Wow.
And I think that has quite powerful implications because personally, I don't feel mentally fatigued after scrolling around on Instagram or something. But there is some indication that it's going to affect workouts. And I think also anecdotally, if I ever have my phone around me when I train, those sessions are always shit, you know?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So it's like I got this this cheap like Casio watch. Like one of the reasons I have this, it's not just because it makes my arms look bigger, but because it's got a timer on it. And so I can use that instead of like picking up my phone and then, I mean, it sounds dumb, but you run the risk of like doing the little tap dance of, you know, Instagram, Facebook, email, whatever. And it just mitigates that risk of me touching my phone during my session because I know it makes my sessions feel so much worse.
Yeah. And so I give all of my clients their program through Google Docs.
Yeah.
And I actually started doing this a long time ago where I wouldn't fill my program in until the end of my session and I would actually write it down in a notebook instead. And that was like so good for my focus because I would just kind of have my music in from my phone and I'd leave my phone somewhere on a bench, like face down. And I just write in my book.
I love that because I did some presentations recently on this and I said, I think it has implications for how we deliver programs to clients because we're all using apps and sheets and stuff to do it. And then they're on their phones during their session.
Yeah.
Now, for some people, it might not matter that much, but I do think that maybe the method of doing a notebook or whatever could actually get people to train way better.
So what do you think some other tools other than a notebook or like leaving your phone around or getting a watch that's only got a couple of functions on it?
Yeah.
Is there anything else you can think of that would kind of reduce the likelihood of mental fatigue?
Yeah, there's some other stuff. So external focus helps a lot. So when we train, we can either focus internally or we can focus externally. So an internal focus would be focusing on squeezing a particular muscle or a particular body sensation or a particular body position. If we have an external focus, then we're focused on the external world. So it'll be your classic cues of like push through the floor, like explode off the chest, things like this. And research has shown that an external focus increases exercise performance and it mitigates mental fatigue. Another thing you can do is get some sort of feedback. So things like velocity trackers, things like having verbal feedback on your rep performance or your rep speed helps. So having a training partner or a coach can help. So because the mechanism for the mental fatigue, or one potential mechanism for the mental fatigue reducing your performance is that it lowers your intrinsic motivation. And we know that having a training partner or some form of feedback increases our intrinsic motivation. So it makes sense that they would sort of cancel each other out in a sense.
Yeah.
So that's another thing that you could do. I think there's a risk of like, if you have more gadgets, then, you know, getting distracted by it is a problem, but certainly just maybe having other people around, you know, if you lift in a squad, if you have a coach or a training partner, that's a big thing that can mitigate that mental fatigue.
Another thing would be people video their lifts all the time.
Yeah.
And then they end up rewinding and fast forwarding 50 times between each set. And all they've done is just like fry their brain.
Yep.
So
Totally.
like I would suggest just watch it once or twice and then put it back down.
Yep. 100%. The other thing is that has been researched on this is mindfulness. So mindfulness, maybe people automatically think of meditation, but it isn't just meditation, but mindfulness practice in general has been shown to reduce mental fatigue. And it might be that I don't know exactly what the mechanism is. It might just be that you're getting a bit more of a buffer between whatever's caused your mental fatigue and your actual lifting. But regardless, there is some stuff in there. So it could just be maybe taking 5 or 10 minutes to focus on your breath or something like that. But actually one of the things that I have been presenting on has been visualization. And there's some evidence now that like visualizing, practicing a lift in the first person actually improves that lift's performance. So I think a really good mindfulness technique for lifters might be to take 5 or 10 minutes to like mentally rehearse your session and walk through it. And that way you're getting a bit of a buffer time to maybe reduce mental fatigue. You're also visualizing, which we know improves performance. And so I think, and then you're practicing mindfulness, which we know also is supposed to mitigate mental fatigue. So that could be a good technique that kind of covers a few bases.
Yeah. I have a funny anecdote about visualization. So when I was playing basketball as a junior, we had a grand final. I think I was in under 14, so I would have been 13. And our coach took us all outside. He's like, all right, everyone close your eyes. And he walked us through a scenario of the whole game. And I reckon he spoke for like 15 minutes.
Really?
And by the end of it, we were all like, this is ridiculous. Like, what are we
Can
doing?
we go in and warm up now?
And he was like the assistant coach as well. So he didn't really like have much to do with us. But then all of a sudden, he's like doing this 15-minute monologue. And we were all like, come on, mate.
That's amazing.
It was so bad.
Fucking hell. But I mean, speaking of basketball, one of the cool studies on that was like during COVID, there was I think it was an NBA team that couldn't train for a period of time. And so what they did was they split them up into 3 groups. They had one group just kind of not train and just not do anything. One group visualized their strength workout. So they lifted in their heads at 85% 1RM. And they had the other group visualize their power workouts, which are obviously lighter and more explosive. And when they retested them after the study period, the group that visualized their strength workouts had maintained their strength best. The group that visualized their power workouts maintained their power best. And the group that didn't visualize anything lost the most from both of those conditions. So, like, yeah, there's something there, right?
I think the pro teams would have been doing a lot of rule breaking to make sure they could have still trained.
Yes, I agree.
Man, thanks for your time today. We'll wrap this up very shortly, but I've just got one final question. If you could eliminate one thing from the social media fitness space, what would it be?
Probably like binary thinking. I just think there's so much like shades of gray with everything. And, you know, I think it's obvious. And I'd also just recommend like on especially social media or whatever medium you're getting your information through, just kind of recognize the strengths and the weaknesses of that medium. Like I obviously use predominantly Instagram for my business, but Instagram is just not conducive to giving the context and the nuance behind stuff. And so you always get some fucking comment of some spud going like, oh, what about this, this, and this? I'm like, mate, you know what? I would have loved to put that in there, but I've got like 200 words to work with.
If I had enough characters, I would have included it, yeah.
Sorry, but you're on Instagram. If you want the nuance, like go to a podcast, go to a blog post or something. So I think just kind of keeping that in mind is always really important.
Yeah, cool. All right. Thanks, man.
Cheers, mate. Cheers.